This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Salmond. It's Thursday, it's the 19th of October, and I'm here in George Square, Glasgow, or Freedom Square, as it came to be known in the 2014 referendum campaign. Now, what am I doing here? Well, I'm here on Thursday, the 19th of October, because you might remember this was the designated day by the Scottish Government for a new referendum on Scotland's future. Last year they said, no ifs, no buts. Thursday, the 19th of October, was the date of the new referendum campaign. So what has happened? Well, clearly there's no referendum today. Otherwise I'd be rushing about the schemes of Glasgow, the northeast of Scotland, trying desperately to get people out to vote. So it hasn't happened. So what's happened instead? Well, precious little, because what was said when the Supreme Court misadventure backfired was that instead there'd be a de facto referendum in next year's general election. Well, now that's not happening. And instead there's Plan C, which apparently is to ask the UK government for a democratic event. In other words, to ask for a referendum in the same way as they've been asked since 2016, and the same answer we all know is going to be no, regardless of how Scotland votes. Now, this square during the September 14 referendum was a square full of joyous political expectation. This is where the crowds rallied anticipating the vote as the momentum built up to September the 18th. It was a square where people came to commiserate the day after when the vote didn't go our way, to share and perhaps even drown their sorrows. Attacked incidentally by a small gang of unionist thugs, which was the only violence that marred an otherwise celebration of democracy through that wonderful summer of 2014. So this became symbolic of people's desire and wish and yearning to have the democratic right to choose our own future. So I'm here today to nominate the people as Scotland's hidden heroes this week. You know, every week in this programme we talk about the hidden heroes, great Scots through the ages who are not celebrated but have done fantastic things for their country and sometimes for the world. But I wonder if the real hidden heroes are the people of Scotland. The day after the referendum, when I resigned office, I said, look, I was confident because of that democratic expression that people would not go back into the shadows and the momentum for the Yes campaign would be carried forward. I'm still confident about that. Despite the missteps of politicians, despite the SNP vote going down, the vote for independence is strong. And if people keep that faith and arrange the political furniture, then they'll find the politicians with the determination to honour that promise. So today let's celebrate the date that should have been another referendum day, that was promised as another referendum day. Let's celebrate as our hidden heroes this week, the ordinary people of Scotland, who are the guardians of our country's future.
Well, that was indeed quite the opening to this week's show from Salmond, and it is of course still the 19th of October and still referendum day. Well, it was supposed to be, and we are still here in Freedom Square in Glasgow, and just behind me is the council. And of course they're facing a battle against the residents of the Wyndford Estate, who are also fighting the housing association, Wheatley Housing Association, to prevent the demolition of 600 houses and 4 tower blocks. Now, last week we featured the residents who are in a big fight with the people behind me and the housing association. So let's just turn back the clock to hear what they had to say and how their activism is so important to keeping those tower blocks in place.
We're in a housing crisis at the moment, homeless housing crisis. when the flats are structurally sound, they could be refitted. Easy.
Because one of the things about Wyndford, I mean, this was a planned community.
Yes, that's right,
and
yeah.
so things like the nature of the different nature of the housing, the tower blocks, the schools, the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
I think that's what architects say. The ecosystem was actually a styled and planned community,
Yes.
and now bits are being ripped away from it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, I don't know if it, you know, when they built this scheme, they seem to get it right for some reason. You know, I mean, I've lived in other places in Glasgow, but when they were building this, they just seem to have got it right, you know, for a number of reasons. I don't know why, but it seems to work, you know, the way they built it.
And Angie, would that be your view as a longer term resident here?
Well, it is my view. I couldn't have said it any better, Peter, because really they have done it a good job when these were first built in the 60s. They suited everybody, the flats, the masonettes, the bison flats, access to two good schools who my daughter went to, and also went to after school hours, because these schools were our community, where kids went to them, where kids had parties in them, kids had Christmas parties in them. They done a big thing in keeping a community together, and they used to have the brownies for the younger children, for the boys as well. They done everything in here together as a community, and I'm just very saddened that this is happening in the community that I moved to, and thought I would be happy to live here forever, and I still want to live here, but I'm saddened that they want to take, when they were built in the 60s, that's concrete and metal. They've outlived half of the houses that have been built and had been brought down, you know, so why do this? It just doesn't make sense when we're having a crisis with everything in society just now, you know, financially.
It seems a remarkable thing to
and
spend £78 million and turn 600 houses into 300.
Well, exactly. That's, I totally agree. That's my point. Why do that when everybody's struggling? You know, and we need to affordable housing, because that's what this Wyndford was about, houses for affordable people to afford.
Kaz, if you had the opportunity to speak directly, let's just imagine you're speaking directly to the Wheatley Group, to Glasgow Council. As a mother, what would your plea to them be?
To retain these buildings, to retrofit them, to extend the social housing stock. Throughout my young son's life, getting houses and waiting housing that are wheelchair accessible and meet the needs of schools in the areas. It's caused me so much disjointed moving. I've moved 3 times, and I've been in the private let sector because I can't get it to the social housing let. To take these buildings down, the houses that they build, I still won't be able to afford. They're not social homes, I won't get them. So again, I'm getting uprooted and moved.
We've been classified as only a small number by Wheatley Group. They don't kind of think much of us that we're going to do anything to sort things out, but I've got the opposite way of looking at it. If we can get more people to slowly join up with the Wyndford Residents Union, we'll be able to get more powerful. That's what I think at the end of the day, because I just get fed up with the way they're kind of treating people and no doing the things that I want to see them doing. I mean, they're saying one thing and then they're doing another thing. So that's what they're basically doing.
And Laura, I mean, you're a housing activist. You've seen how you've been homeless yourself, of course. How do you see this situation in terms of what needs to be done?
Well, the way it feels currently is that we have a situation in Scotland where the Wheatley Group are being allowed to dictate housing policy. They're allowed to make political decisions that are affecting everybody in society. So we have a homelessness crisis, as you know, in Scotland that's worse than it's ever been. We've got more families homeless, more children homeless than there's ever been. So Wheatley being allowed to take decisions like this is actually an attack on working people. It's an attack on families, on women, on everybody in society.
Well, they're going to spend £73 million, mostly public money. And we know that these flats can be retrofitted, turned into family-sized homes for far less money. Their own reports state that they can do that. So we're sat here with a massive housing crisis. You know, 16,000 bairns homeless, a city the size of Perth homeless, 244,000 people on a council house waiting list. And here we are getting rid of 600 social rented homes. Now, don't get us wrong, we're not, you know, we're reasonable people. Had the Wheatley Group and the council come and said, we're going to give you 600 social homes as a replacement, maybe we wouldn't have had an argument. But the fact that they were initially mooting 300 mid-market rent homes, now obviously they're not saying that in public anymore, but that's what we heard from one of the local SNP councillors. So we're in the position that, you know, these could be let out tomorrow, handling the housing crisis.
And I'm joined by Sean O'Neill, one of the other activists here in Wyndford Estate. Sean, you're a campaigner against the demolition of these high-rises, but you've had a bit of difficulty in the campaign. Tell us what happened when you were planning to demonstrate against this, against the demolition.
Well, at the start of this year, the campaign ramped up, and so did the backlash that we received for the Wheatley Group and Police Scotland. The issues started arising when we launched a tenant-led occupation, the 120 block over there.
Which block is that, Sean?
It's that one there, so it's this
one here.
If you get the way, it's the first one to go, and my house is just that block here there, so me and my family are like metres away from the blast zone, and if it comes down, I'll be like evacuated from my house and that.
Join us after the break when we see how the Wyndford residents themselves reacted to last week's show. We shall see you then. Welcome back. Now, last Thursday, the 12th of October, myself and Alex had the privilege of premiering last week's episode at the Maryhill Hub in Glasgow for the residents of the Wyndford housing estate. Here's what they had to say when they watched the show.
My concerns is the place has changed a lot over the years, and a lot of it I feel is due to bad management by factors' decisions.
Now, Peter, you're a veteran of a number of Wyndford community campaigns, the school campaign of a few years ago. Is this the worst proposal yet affecting this community?
Well, you know, it's up there with the schools coming down, because the schools were like the heart of the community. They used to say we had a denominational school and a non-denominational school right beside each other, you know, and it was fantastic, you know.
We have a situation in Scotland where the Wheatley Group are being allowed to dictate housing policy. They're allowed to make political decisions that are affecting everybody in society.
Wheatley have created this future focus group that we're not even allowed to even go and see what it entails if we were to sit there and watch it. And
you know, this is a landlord that got rid of half of its stock, either through demolition or second stage stock transfer, and then swallowed up around 8 other housing associations. And this is not a landlord that builds houses, this is a landlord that pulls houses down.
Taz, do you want to say a word or two?
What, did they enjoy the programme?
What did they tell you?
From one chair to another, as you say, William, to use your language. You did well, I told you. Did you enjoy the programme?
And now to look at another aspect of community life here in the Wyndford. I'm joined by Stephen Patrick, who's been coaching and training and encouraging fitness in this community for about 40 years. Stephen, welcome to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Tell me, I mean, from your experience, right, I mean, tell me a bit about this facility you've got here in Wyndford, how it would compare, say, let's say, I was just, you can see, going to a private gym. What's cost-wise?
I would say cost-wise it's more effective because it's more within a value that you can afford at £30 odd for a year's membership.
So that's £30 a year for the equipment, facilities you've got here?
For all the facilities you have here, yes, about £30 a year.
And private, how much would it cost me?
Your JDs and your other large properties, probably about £20 a month.
So in terms of real fitness for folk on the ground in this estate, this is invaluable. And you've got all age ranges, right, from the youngsters to the slightly less young.
Exactly. The best age group starts from about 16 and it's upwards to the roof. But the fitness level here, what you pay for, it's not about what you pay, it's the effort you put into it. And I feel that they come here and they're a bit more relaxed in this environment.
And I mean, from your perspective, you're a Maryhill boy.
I am Maryhill, yeah.
So you've got quite a perspective on the strength of the community here, and what your worry is about whether a development might take aspects of that away.
Certainly, the change in the community would devastate a gym like this because the people come here feeling relaxed in the environment, in their own environment, and they know the people that are coming. It's not like a stranger going into a strange multiplex.
So when you start interfering with a planned village, which is what the Wyndford is, it's not just a question of bricks and mortar, it's a question of social relationships and facilities and community identity.
Definitely the social community in here and the comradeship of the community is really close when they're coming in here together. They know who they're training with, they know they can have a laugh, and they're getting value for money.
And in your long period of encouraging fitness, let's say, you must have a few successes, maybe even internationally with some of the competitions you have.
Well, I don't like to blow my own trumpet. My nephew has played for Scotland Rugby World Cup under 21, so he's one of my proudest.
And you've got competitions that some of the lads and lassies who come through this, they get to...
The biggest competition in here, Alex, is the competition against themselves, so they're always challenging themselves. So they think they can do 10 press-ups, I'll get them to do 15. If they can do 15, they're definitely doing 20.
And you know, Stephen, if it wasn't for the other interviews I've got to do, I'd be right there in the weights with you, you know.
I could fit you in for 20 minutes, not a problem.
It's a deal. Stephen Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex.
For joining me on Scotland Speaks.
Thank you.
Now, campaigners in the Wyndford come in all age groups, in all shapes and sizes, and I'm now joined by Kirsty Dury. Tell me, Kirsty, what age are you?
8.
8 years old now. You brought your banner along. Tell me a bit about what's this banner about?
It's about the trees, and there was a row of trees just cut down.
Yeah, I saw the logs. Well, just a few weeks ago. And what did you feel about that?
I felt angry.
Angry. You look a bit angry. What's on the other side of your banner? So, does it say?
It's Stop for Your Life because it's a guy cutting down a tree.
Yeah.
And we need the trees for air.
And why do you need trees? What's the great thing about trees?
They breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out air.
Absolutely right, Kirsty. Listen, I was about twice your age before I knew the importance of that. But they're also very beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah.
And did you ever go climbing up these trees?
No, not those ones.
You're not just saying that because you're on television, are you?
No.
Have you been on television before?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kirsty, something tells me you might well be on television again. Thank you very much for coming along and telling me about your campaign to save the trees in the Wyndford Estate.
Thanks.
Well, now we've heard what the Wyndford residents had to say, it's now your turn to let us know what you thought. Scotland the Brave says, "My heart is with every one of them. I need a house." Fantastic documentary, Alex. Thank you very much for giving the working class a voice. We need housing. The young guy at the end that occupied the flat, on yourself, son, he's a local champion. He then goes on to say, John Wheatley, the Red Clydesider, will be turning in his grave over this madness. Kizzy Wiz, who's a regular, says, thousands of very expensive houses are being built around me in Midlothian and all over Scotland. Who are they for? Too expensive for all the Scots seeking homes. Thank you, Alex, for standing up for this community let down by the council and others. Well done. Paul from Maryhill says, glad to see you covering this after your appearance at the Hub in the Wyndford and the promise to cover it in a future episode of Scotland Speaks. Good work. Well, we are, Paul, people of our word, you can be sure. And finally, Jacqueline says, thanks Alex, Taz and the residents of Wyndford. Wish you well in your endeavours. Well, the Wyndford residents are certainly up against the big battalions. We've described it as a David and Goliath type contest, but they're not without their own influential backers in two of Scotland's most celebrated architects. Alex is joined by them both now.
Now, as we've seen, the Wyndford Residents Union, taking on the big battalions in Glasgow Council and the Wheatley Group, but they're not short of a bit of heavy artillery of their own, and some of Scotland's most renowned architects have rallied to their cause, and I'm delighted to be joined by two such people this evening. We've got Kate McIntosh and we've got Professor Alan Dunlop. Can I turn to you first, Kate McIntosh? You, as well as being a celebrated architect, you've got a kind of personal connection with the Wyndford.
Yes, my father was one of the chief officers in Scottish Special Housing Association, and Harold Buteau was the head of the architectural section. So we probably did meet because I did a short stint after my first year at college in Scottish Special Housing. But he raised the standard of the design in the department when he came. So they did actually win some prizes for sensitive design and also for the quality of their workmanship.
And Professor Dunlop, you as well have a personal connection with the Wyndford.
I have a long association and personal connection. My grandfather was stationed there when it was the Maryhill Barracks, and I very often used to take my students of architecture. I'm a professor of running a Master of Architecture course to Wyndford and took them through what I thought was a kind of fortress town, because the gateway into the barracks was kept there, so it was like entering into a walled village. And it made me laugh when I first got involved in this, because I got a lot of abuse from letters in the papers saying, what does an architect know about saving high flats? He's probably never lived in a high flat like this in his life. When in truth, I lived in a flat like that, exactly like the ones in Wyndford, for the first 19 years of my life. And I loved it. And that put their gas at a peak, Alex, I can tell you that. So I've never had that level of comment ever coming back to me again. But I do have a long association and love, really, of Wyndford.
Now, Kate McIntosh, you and your colleague architects are arguing strongly for renovation as an alternative to demolition. But the public attitude to high-rise flats is usually pretty negative. What is it about this particular estate which makes these high-rise flats well worth keeping?
They have, in my view, and I did visit the scheme in June of this year, are a cut above the run-of-the-mill high-rise flats that were proliferating around Glasgow. The entrance lobbies, for instance, are very generous in size. The ground floor, the finishes are high quality ceramic tiles, and it shows the sensitive regard that Buteau had for the history of the site. That there's a plaque in every entrance hall which shows the plan of the barracks and a photograph of the regiment that was based there. There are 2 escape staircases, which is in line with the latest recommendations coming out of the terrible disaster that happened to the flats in Westminster, in Kensington, Chelsea rather, which burned down. So they are compliant with the latest thinking about how you should design local authority housing. And also at ground floor level, Buto changes it from being a crosswall construction to being framed. They're on columns, which allows him to free up the enclosing wall to a curvilinear definition, which is in glazed bricks. And to me, this is reminiscent of the work of the famous Russian architect who really brought the modern movement to this country, Lubetkin. So the way the building meets the ground, and also the termination at the top, there's a sensitivity about it, which is not to be found in every point block in and around Glasgow.
Professor Dunlop, we've heard that Harold Buto, this legendary planner with the Scottish Special Housing Association, what vision did Buto have in mind when he designed the Wyndford?
The pilote, or the columns that Kate's just talked about, allows the high-rises to float above a carpet of green. And the intention is, for me, it'd be following Corbusian principles. The residential area is lived above the ground plane and allows the ground floor, the grass and the trees and everything for community use and for the residences to almost within a parkland setting. The sad thing about it, as far as the vision of Buto is concerned, is that the trees are all now mature, right? And much of this fantastic landscape that Buto was responsible for creating, he wouldn't have seen. He would just have had the vision looking 60 years in advance to see the lime trees and the chestnut trees and the plane trees in this mature landscape that is in danger as a consequence of this demolition of potentially being destroyed. Historically, and the reason why I took the students along to see it was that I think these are very important as far as social housing is concerned from the 1960s and 70s, that is really in danger of being lost. And as Kate has just mentioned there, they can very easily be retrofitted and made into desirable properties again. But again, why they're not doing it, maybe perhaps we could talk about that and the reason why the Housing Association are so interested in demolishing what is, I think, a unique residential and social environment.
Now, Kate McIntosh, much of the debate about retrofit against demolition has been a debate about the carbon impact of both cases. But you've drawn attention to a specific danger, and that is of released asbestos. I mean, how much of a danger do you think that would be from demolition at the Wyndford?
The danger arising from asbestos is very acute. Asbestos, as you probably know, falls into 3 types. There's white, and there's blue, and there's brown. White is relatively not so dangerous, but the blue and the brown, the inhalation of a single fibre can be a sentence of death. So what, this is all built into the health and safety requirements legally enforced. Before any demolition takes place, you must make a complete detailed survey of the location of the asbestos and the type of the asbestos. And if the asbestos, so long as it's not disturbed and sealed in, is not dangerous. But even such a thing as driving a screw through a surface which is either asbestos or coated with asbestos can cause this very dangerous situation. So having identified where the asbestos is, you then have to send in a specialist crew wearing protective clothing. You should screen off all the areas where the asbestos is, seal it up in a completely airtight way, and it then has to be taken to a registered dump. So the whole of that process should precede any other demolition that goes on.
Now, Alan Dunlop, the council and the housing association seem to have taken a very cavalier attitude to this. I mean, no environmental assessment carried out before the demolition was approved, which has made the council fall victim to the judicial review in the Court of Session, and now have been ordered to make some sort of assessment. And yet when I visited the Wyndford a couple of weeks ago, they just demolished 7 lime trees despite a court order saying that they had to consider the environment before they went ahead with the demolition. Well, there was this cavalier attitude to the courts and to the law and to the environment. What's this all about?
Well, cavalier attitude, Alex, is putting it very mildly. They've had also a very cavalier attitude towards the residents, and being quite disingenuous as far as, you know, the reason why they're doing it is concerned. I mean, I got involved, or I was invited to get involved to talk about it as the piece of architecture, just simply from that. But the more I learned about what is being on, the more shocked that I became about the whole attitude towards the residents, and, you know, refusing to meet them, for instance. And some of the information that we're putting out was, I knew to be wrong, and, you know, really needed to be challenged. So I started off looking at this from a simply architectural point of view. And then I got so involved with the residents themselves, and so supportive of their attitude. These are really clever people, and they know their business, that I thought, look, there's more to the architecture here. There's a real social problem here, and there's a real high-handed attitude that the Housing Association and also Glasgow City Council are taking. I mean, the Residents Union had discovered minutes going back from the very origins of this project, and they had an agreement with Glasgow City Council about, you know, the demolition and the continuation of the project before any application was actually made to the council itself, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. So from my point of view, cavalier attitude is the very least it's been. And there's been misinformation all the way through. And every time there's a report in the newspapers about Wheatley and about, you know, the attitude of the housing associations, the Wheatley trumpet, you know, this is just a band of renegade people supporting this, when in fact people like myself and like Kate and Malcolm Fraser and other high professionals who really have built a lot all over the country are also challenging this, but it seems to be ignored by the Housing Association and also the Glasgow City Council. So they've been more than cavalier or less than cavalier, whatever the right attitude is towards that. They've been disingenuous, and this really irritates me. And, you know, the reason why I'm so supportive of the Residents Union himself. And I'm so delighted that they had this success in the courts, and the very fact that they cut down trees just a few weeks ago is another example of, you know, their attitude towards the whole thing, and the disregard that they really have towards the Residents Union, and what they're trying to do is you know, to save their flats and save their homes.
Now, Kate McIntosh, how frustrated with your track record around the country of being involved in the building of award-winning social housing, how frustrated does it make you that this revolutionary design from the past is being needlessly sacrificed? How irritated are you about this plan to demolish something so special as these high-rise flats?
Well, I'm really extremely furious about it. Going back to the trees, for instance, any architect of any social responsibility regards trees on a site as a huge asset to be conserved and cherished, because they have such a contribution to make to human welfare. Now, looking at the demolition plan that Wheatley Homes submitted, within the area of demolition, there are at least 29 trees, and they just say these trees will be removed. And these trees are, in the main, mature forest trees that have taken almost 70, 80 years to reach maturity. And that is indicative of the level of care with which they approach this. And here I think we have to think about what is the nature of housing associations these days. Sadly, since the withdrawal of central government grant for housing associations, there is little to distinguish them from commercial volume house builders. They are just in there to mine, to extract from the site the maximum that they can possibly lever out of every square metre. Here you've got 600 small flats, and I must point out, in case you didn't know, that of all the 4 regions of the UK, Scotland has the highest proportion of single person households, 36%. And yet they say that these flats are too small, they're unpopular, we can't let them. Pull them down and replace them with half the number of family dwellings, in other words, executive homes, which they can then, a high proportion of them, sell off to finance their next ongoing move. And Wheatley Homes is expanding all the time. They now have Wheatley Homes South, so they're moving into the south. And incidentally, they're putting up their rents above the level which is legal in Scotland. There's nearly a 1% rise in rents above the 3% per annum, which is allowed.
Professor Alan Dunlop, academic, renowned architect, is this what you see driving this quite extraordinary, when you stand back and look at this plan of the Wheatley Group to demolish at all costs, is it an economic or financial imperative that's driving this plan?
Well, there's no doubt to my mind that it's the value of the site that's driving it. I mean, it must be one of the most best sites in the whole of the west of Scotland. I mean, you have Bearsden on your doorstep, you're south facing, you're bordering onto the River Kelvin. You have Kelvindale just right next door to you. It's a developer's dream. They would give their right arm for a site like that, to put as many houses as they possibly can. There would just be one thing, though, I would add to what Kate has just said there. I mean, we had COP26 last year in Glasgow, when the City Council in Glasgow trumpeted how committed they were to net zero. And here we have a situation where that, what the Housing Association are promoting and saying is necessary flies in the face of all the promises that were made as far as retrofitting is concerned that was made at COP26. And that's something that I don't think either can be ignored. But, why are they doing it? They're doing it, in my view, because it's an extremely valuable site. And as I say, and as Kate has just said, I mean, housing associations are a bit like developers themselves now. And this is a site that a developer would give their right arm for. It has all the attributes within easy access into the West End of Glasgow, into the university. What a site it is. If only the residents that are there would frankly bugger off, everything would be okay.
Professor Alan Dunlop, Kate McIntosh, thank you so much for your expertise and joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
You're welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Now at the top of the show we promised we would give you Wheatley Home's response to some of the issues that have been raised. Now unfortunately they declined to be interviewed on camera but have issued this statement. A Wheatley Home's Glasgow spokesperson said, "This small group of activists with alternative agendas may not agree, but all reasonable people will know the overwhelming majority of tenants living in Wyndford want these 4 outdated blocks demolished and for £73 million to be invested in new homes and transforming their community." An 8-week consultation supported by leading tenant body TPAS Scotland saw 85% of Wyndford tenants back the regeneration plans, with 87% of tenants living in the 4 blocks earmarked for demolition also supporting the proposals. TPAS said the consultation was both robust and fair and gave residents every opportunity to have their say on regeneration plans. The regeneration will see at least 300 new energy efficient homes built in the community, including over 255 for social rent. Tenants have told us they want more larger family homes in Wyndford, which is only possible by demolishing these 4 blocks. At every stage of this process, they say, the voice and wishes of tenants living in Wyndford needs to be heard. Well, that's the end of their statement, and of course they answered a number of questions which Alex posed to them in writing, and those will be published on our sites for you to be able to see. But is that the last word on the matter? I hardly think so. After meeting these residents, they seem in no mood to be backing down. Let's go back to Alex to see how he thinks this might all end up.
Now as dusk approaches in Glasgow, I'm standing here still in Freedom Square with the City Council building behind me. This wonderful building. But it's there for a very special reason. This is what you call empty chairing. Empty chairing is a television term. When people won't come onto your show to answer legitimate questions, you stick an empty chair. So right now, Glasgow Council is the equivalent of an empty chair. Incidentally, if they change their mind and do come on and answer our questions about the Wyndford, then we'll give them plenty of airtime. But right now, they're refusing to do so. And that's a big puzzle, you know, because despite the fact they don't own any houses anymore, they're still a housing authority. I know this because they've just published a very expensive looking strategy document for the next 5 years. So given that strategy document's publication, it seems passing strange that they won't answer a few simple questions about what they're doing or not doing as far as the Wyndford residents are concerned. There was something that Nick Dury, one of the activists, said to me about the local politicians and indeed the MSPs and MPs. He said that they weren't prepared to invest their political capital in battling the Wheatley Group. The Wheatley Group seems to be so powerful that elected politicians don't want to waste their time in gainsaying what they've got to say or argue. Well, they should, because politicians are there to represent the people, and if they're not prepared to do that, then they should choose another profession. Now, at the start of this talk in Freedom Square, I said something about referendum. Referendum it never was. Well, I've got another proposal coming up. You see, I was suspicious about some of the stuff that the Wheatley Group told us. Yes, they answered our questions, but 2 things stood out for me. Firstly, they described the Wyndford Residents Union as a small group of activists with an alternative agenda. That was their quote. Well, firstly, it's not a small group. I know it's not a small group because I've met lots of them. And as for this alternative agenda business, this seems to suggest a secret political motivation. Well, the WRU, the Wyndford Residents Union, I think they've got as much of a secret political motivation as the WRI, the Women's Rural Institute. I've met them. All I detect is ordinary folk worried about their estate, worried about the place that they've been brought up in, and whether the integrity and whether the community identity is going to be destroyed by the demolition plans. So my referendum proposal is this. Why don't we put the demolition against the renovation? The spending £70 million plus to build less houses, as opposed to spending that money to have more houses. Why don't we put the residents' view against the Wheatley Group's view and have a referendum of all the people of the Wyndford? One person, one vote. And then we can see what the genuine expression of opinion is, with agreement to follow that, whatever it might be. So instead of having the referendum that never was, that should have decided Scotland's Freedom Day, let's propose a referendum in the Wyndford. And let's, just for a change, listen to the people. I think that would be a good course forward for Wyndford and a good course forward for Scotland. So remember to watch this show, Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, every Thursday at 9 o'clock on every social media channel that you can possibly imagine. We're here every Thursday. Join us then. This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.